Hey everyone, welcome to the Investor Evolution podcast. I'm your host, Kimberly Hoyt, and today I am so excited to welcome Nathanael Opoulos to our podcast. He is the host of the Pots of Gold podcast. He's a fellow investor, and he's actually the first person from Pace Morby World that I ever met in person. So I'm excited to interview you. Welcome, Nathanael. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, no, it's my pleasure. Definitely happy to be on the show.
Yeah, so we met about a year ago, actually, maybe a little bit over that in Salt Lake. And it was for an event that Pace Morby was speaking at. And so we all kind of got tickets for it. And I just remember seeing you, and I was like, I know him. Like, I've seen his picture. I know exactly who he is. And I just went up to you and I was like, hi. I don't know if I remembered your name, but I was just like, I know him and I know he's part of our group. And so I was so excited to connect with you and meet you there. Was that one of your first events
It was the very first event I'd ever gone to.
Okay.
I think it was the Limitless Arena was the event.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was a wild day because it was something like 13 hours straight of speakers.
Yeah, it was definitely intense, but I was so thankful that I was like, okay, I know someone here. I know someone. Okay, well, thank you so much for being here today. And I want to just start off with, tell us a little bit about your journey. Tell me how you got into real estate and how you got into, I call it Pace Morby World, how you got into this crazy investing space.
Sure thing. I think I'm going to go back a little bit farther than that, just because it sets the context for why I ended up making the decisions that I made.
I love it.
After I got married to my wife, I'd say 2 or 3 years into it, I was making $10 an hour making customer service calls for CenturyLink, trying to sell cable television of all things. And I didn't really like doing that. Part of it was just the fact that I didn't think cable television was long for the world.
Right.
And I took a look around one day in those cubicles and I saw people in their 70s and their 80s that were forced to come into work because they didn't have a retirement and they didn't have any marketable skills that would allow them to earn anything more than what they were doing. And it was kind of a reality check for me because I realized that I didn't have any kind of marketable skills that set me apart from anybody else there either. I realized that if I didn't make a change in 50 years or so, I was going to be that person stuck in the customer service cubicles. Mm-hmm. And that was scary, right? So I quit my job, and that was terrifying because I didn't know what the future was going to look like. And I went back to school to become a machinist full time. And I didn't know how things were going to turn out, but it turned out really good because I started to develop that skill. And I was hired on as an intern for about $14 an hour. And since then, I've about tripled my hourly rate. So the lesson that I got from that was that in order to earn more, you have to add to your skill set.
Yes.
Fast forward, I'd say 7 or 8 years from that point, my little boy had been born. Mm-hmm. And I realized that there was only 2 ambitions that I ever had in my life before that point. First one was to become a father. Mm-hmm. And the second one was to try to be a good person. Mm-hmm. But now that I have somebody that I have to take care of and set an example for, all of a sudden I was like, okay, what kind of example am I setting for him unless I go out and try to achieve more than what I've been trying to achieve? Mm-hmm. And so I thought, what else can I do to make it better for him? Because we were in the process of looking for a house at the time. And COVID hit, so all the house prices had shot up like $100,000 in the area, and the interest rates had all climbed like 4 percentage points.
Uh-huh.
And I realized that if appreciation follows the same trend as it has over the last 30 years, that when he reaches my age, he'll be looking at entry-level homes for $1 million. And if I didn't learn how real estate worked, I wouldn't be able to pass that kind of information on to him so that he would be able to get into a home when the time comes.
Right.
And I decided that I wanted to make $1 million, or at least become the person that was capable of doing that. And lo and behold, the very next day, I found Pace Morby on YouTube. Yeah. I'd never heard of him before in my life. But like the moment I made the decision, it was like, poof, he manifested into reality.
I love it.
I mean, I know that's not like literally how it happened, but that from my perspective, that's what it felt like. And so that's kind of where we started. I was terrified to do a lot of this stuff because, well, going back, when I was 18, I was actually assaulted by a roommate that I'd had who had schizophrenia.
Oh.
And he came home drunk one night. And after he assaulted me, he left the entire right side of my skull shattered.
Oh.
I had 23 fragments left in the right side of my face, 2 hairline fractures into the left side, 3 buccal fractures around the eye socket. The doctor said that if I put my thumb up underneath my top teeth and gave it a slight tug, everything would have just slid forward.
Mm.
And I went to school and to work for a week without getting it looked at because I thought I had a nice shiner, and the damage was extensive enough that the nerves in my face had actually shut off the feeling.
Yes.
And the only reason we got it looked at was because my mom came to visit that weekend. And the fact that we fixed it when we did actually saved my eyeball, because if the swelling had gone down any farther, the bone fragments would have actually cut the optic nerve off and I would have lost my eyeball.
Yeah.
But it takes a long time to recover from something like that, even longer to recover from the emotional setbacks.
Yeah.
The thing about the Gator community that has been so beneficial for me is that they really encourage you to network with other people
Mm-hmm.
and to establish these relationships for doing business. But the side effect of doing that and going outside my comfort zone is that I was able to heal from a lot of that trauma from that event. And it's been a huge life changer for me.
Oh, good.
And I tell people that it's been the best $3,000 I ever spent, because that's how much it was when I joined the program.
Right. No, I agree. Wow, I didn't know that. I didn't know that story. So, like, when you went to that first event, that Limitless event, did you have a lot of nervousness going into it? Were you worried about meeting people? And then here's me, crazy lady, that's like, "Hi, I'm so excited to meet you."
No, it's actually a good thing though, because you made me feel welcomed. And yes, I have felt the fear and the nervousness.
Mm-hmm.
And I still feel it every day, even when I'm interviewing people on my podcast.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing is even though the fear doesn't go away, I'm more capable of dealing with it.
Right. Yeah.
So it's been life changing.
Yeah. I think the phrase, like, it doesn't get easier, you get better, is really this. And, I think this goes back to anything new and anything that you're scared of. Once you're in proximity of it and you keep putting yourself in that proximity of it, it becomes less scary. You become more comfortable with it. Not that it's always comfortable, but there's a familiarity with it. And so it's not as intense or scary as it had been that first time, right? I'm sure that first event was a lot and it was intense. And then how did you feel going into Squat Up Summit? So Squat Up Summit, for those of you guys that don't know, that was in April of 2024. And that was one of Pace Morby's big group events with his Sub-2 community, his Gator community, and then the top tier TC community. And so we got to meet in person again there. But how was it going into that?
Yeah, I think it was a lot different, because while I kind of told myself this story that I was an introvert, I discovered at Squat Up that maybe that's not 100% the case. Mm-hmm. If I feel like I can connect with people, then I am extroverted in the right situation. I did have to take a couple breaks away from people just to kind of recharge, but I really enjoyed the trip out there. It was actually the first time I'd ever booked a flight for myself or booked a hotel for myself. So like all kinds of things that I've never done before have kind of sprouted out of putting myself out there and trying to learn and improve myself.
I love that. So you're growing in a lot of different realms and different ways. Now, one of the things I want to say is I think you're what people call an ambivert. So you're, kind of introverted. You can be extroverted when you need to be, but you need that time to recharge. I'm actually a lot like that as well. Like, I can do it, but I always say my love language is quality alone time. Like, I just need that to just recharge and do my thing. So I think maybe that's, and you may be more on the introverted side and can do that extroverted for a little bit, and that's okay. And I think there's a lot of incredible people out there who are very similar. And man, you guys shine when you're out in that arena, but then you just need that time for yourself. So I think that's awesome. So let's talk about, so since joining Gator, when did you join the Gator method?
I'd say July of 23,
Okay.
the very end of July of
Okay,
23.
so I was like a month ahead of you. So since July of 23, tell me about your real estate journey and maybe some of the things that you had to go through to get to where you are today.
Sure. I think the most significant thing happened shortly after I joined. I think it was around Father's Day. Maybe it was slightly before I joined even. I was coming home from my sister's house, and I drove up into the Salt Lake Valley. And I don't know if you've ever entered the Salt Lake Valley from the freeway, but as I came over the top of the mountain, I looked out and I realized that the entire valley is full of houses and other types of buildings, from one mountainside all the way to the other mountainside. And it just hit me that day like a bolt of lightning that every single one of those houses represented like $250,000 to a couple $1,000,000. And all of a sudden, the abundance was just like, it was right in front of me. And I was like, holy crap, there's way more money than I ever thought was possible.
Yeah.
And I realized that even if I were to tap into a small percentage of that, no one would even notice the difference of like the fact that I had it instead of someone else because it was so abundant. And that was exciting because I was like, okay, all I have to do is learn the skills that are required to be able to take part.
Yeah.
And so that was the first thing. The other thing is I had a lot of analysis paralysis when going to buy our first house. I decided for whatever reason that I did not want to pay private mortgage insurance. I thought that was ridiculous, that I shouldn't have to pay it, and that there's no reason that I would ever have to do that. And so I was going to save a full 20% for a down payment. Problem is I was like $4,000 short of a good 20% when COVID hit and all the house prices shot up ridiculous amounts.
Right.
And basically I missed my window. And so I was like, what am I supposed to do now? I can't afford a house and I have a baby on the way. What are we going to do? And so I started learning from Pace on his YouTube channel and I ended up joining Gator Method. And the funny thing is I was like, I don't know about this. This feels like a scam. If I put my money down here, I might never see it again, but we're going to take a chance. And it turned out really good. But I did join the Gator Method because I wasn't sure if it was going to pan out or not. Because I'd first found out about sub 2, which is a higher cost of entry. The cool thing that came from it was the fact that I started to understand real estate better. And we bought our first house because I set myself a deadline that I was going to try to find a sub 2 house, but that if I couldn't, I would put us into the first house my wife was willing to live in.
Okay, I love it.
And so we bought this little townhouse in December. We bought it traditionally, but the cool thing is that when the appraisal came back, it appraised for $8,000 more than what we were paying for it. And so right off the bat, it ended up being a really good deal for us. And yes, we're paying private mortgage insurance, but it's like $32 a month.
Gotcha.
And I look at that and I was like, why was that such a sticking point for me? I couldn't tell you, but that's the way it was. And now that I've done the thing, I understand that it's not that big of a deal.
Right. Well, congratulations on the first house. That's awesome. Okay. So as far as, so now you're kind of in the community, you're learning, you're growing. What did you decide to focus on, or had that been difficult for you?
It was a little bit difficult. I decided to go with Gator in part because I figured it was something that I could do with my night shift job because I do work nights and I sleep in the afternoon, and I'm also trying to raise a toddler. And I figured that I could probably get that to work on the off hours that I have. But that's not to say that I wasn't exploring other options as well. I tried to do wholesaling as an integrator for a little while. I put money into a crowd fund, and I actually have partial ownership of a 160-unit apartment complex in Arizona because of that investment that I did. And then I've also done private money loans. In fact, the most recent one that I did was $14,000 out, $17,000 back after about 30 days. And that one turned out really good. So I think there's utility in exploring different avenues because you get to learn what you like and what you don't like. But at some point, you do have to make the decision to go all in on one thing and focus on it. Otherwise, you're going to be spread too thin to make any progress anywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's go back and let's talk about your PML deal and to kind of walk us through that, why you decided to do it, how it went, some of the the blessings and some of the maybe hurdles that you had to go through with that.
Yeah, sure. So I think the first thing that I'd like to know is that I decided on $14,000 because that was an amount that I felt that if things went south and I lost everything, I could recuperate from.
Gotcha.
And so that was part of it. The other thing is it was with a young man who was doing his first deal. And sometimes people say that, well, that's a kind of a red flag. If they don't have experience, you might lose your money. But because it was my first deal as well, I figured, well, we're in the same boat. I'd like to help him get his first deal. And we kind of scratch your back, scratch mine kind of a scenario. And it worked out really well. Originally, we were going to use his personal residence as collateral for the loan. But we found out from the real estate attorney that I spoke to that doing that would cause usury laws to kick in the state of Pennsylvania, and it would have prevented me from being able to earn as much on the return. So instead of doing that, what we did is we structured it in such a way that I would get 50% ownership of the property until he paid me back.
Awesome.
And at the time that he paid me back, I exited the deal with a quitclaim deed.
Perfect. Nice. Okay, great. So that was a great little workaround and a little pivot that you were able to come up with.
And the reason he needed the money is because he didn't have the liquidity that he needed, but he was going to get paid back from his construction company. He just needed like 3 weeks to get the sellers so that they could move to Texas because they wanted to move right away.
Gotcha.
And so I was kind of just like bridging the gap between the two time periods for him.
Perfect. So, and that was like definitely a perfect Gator deal. They can be a little riskier, obviously, but there can be bigger rewards because obviously $3,000 return in 30 days is awesome. What were some of so obviously you learned the lesson about we can't collateralize against a personal property, which is a good lesson to learn. What other things came up through that deal that you're glad you learned from it? Because you said you kind of went into this as a learning opportunity, which I think is awesome. And sometimes we do just have to get into it to figure out if this is something that we want to do and how to learn from it. So,
well, and that's also the thing is that I have this tendency to get caught up in the weeds of trying to analyze things and try to make sure everything's perfect before going in on something. But I learned that there's no real such thing as a perfect deal. There's always going to be things that are going to be like not optimal. And so you have to just kind of learn and decide what things you're okay with. The cool thing is that I didn't actually have cash on hand to do this deal. I used a credit card that I got through my local credit union, and I liquidated the funds on it using a service called Plastique. That charged me about 2.9% of the total amount. So I ended up paying up around $400 to liquidate the funds to be able to do the deal. So that ate into my return a little bit, but I figured that's just kind of the cost of doing business.
right.
And maybe that's something that people don't talk about a lot, is that there are costs associated with doing these things that you have to take into consideration. The second thing is that I actually paid for the loan documents to be drafted. I learned that that's typically handled by the borrower, but because we were both doing our first deal, as part of negotiations, I told them that I'd be willing to cover that because the experience was actually more important to me than the return.
Gotcha. Nice.
And so I ended up paying about $400 to have those expedited when we needed them to have those go through.
Okay. Gotcha. And then I think you used a TC, right? You used Victoria?
Yeah. Yep, I did.
Nice.
Yep. And she did an awesome job. She's able to help us communicate with the title company and take care of all of the documentation as well as the payoff letter once everything was sent back and I got the funds on my end as well.
Okay, perfect. Awesome. So a great experience overall. Obviously, yeah, I think that's important. There is a cost of doing this. Sometimes there's wire fees, there's attorney fees, but that $400 is well worth it to know that like, oh, I can't collateralize against this and we have to find a different way. It's worth it. And I would encourage everyone to make sure they're consulting their attorney with every deal for sure. I think that's another thing that people don't necessarily talk about is actually having an attorney read through your paperwork and just make sure that there's things that you aren't missing. We were on a Zoom yesterday with Tracy Koa for the connector Zoom, and she was talking about that. Sometimes they just see stuff that she doesn't catch because it's not on the back of her mind to think about it. So they're just going to see things differently than you do, and I think that's really important. So
Exactly. And the lady we used, her name was Sherry Harris.
Okay.
And she actually did catch a few things from our joint venture agreement. We'd use some terminology that's not really part of legalese or legal jargon. And so she's like, you guys got to change the way this is worded because the term ghosting isn't a legal term. And so it wasn't, we had to change like it into lack of communication for this period of time.
Okay.
Things like that.
Perfect. Okay. Now, have things shifted for you? So that was a private money lending deal. Have things shifted for you? And if so, what are you working on now?
So basically my focus right now is the EMDs and the double closings. And that stands for earnest money deposits, where we'll come in and cover the earnest monies or the double closings, because some of the states have regulations that make it either illegal or you can only do one wholesaling deal a year. And so we come in and we help wholesalers fund those so that they can continue to scale their business.
Awesome. Great. And how is that going? Is that still getting the ball rolling and getting things up and running, the infrastructure in place?
Yeah, I've been learning from a young man named Ryan Schroep. He's got a whole, basically a coaching course or community, whatever you want to refer it to as. He gives a lot of value on how teaches you how to structure things, how to do lead generation, a lot of things that are business related that maybe someone like myself didn't understand when first getting into it. Because I'm a blue collar worker. I came from this W-2 environment, and now I'm trying to learn how to run a business. And there's just a lot of things you don't know what you don't know. You know?
No, that's great. And it's. I think one of the things that is so important about this that you bring up is collaboration and learning from others who have done what you want to do, and you're learning from them, because you're right. There are things that I came from the medical space. I have no idea about business, so there's things that you just don't know and you have no idea to even look for it. So I think that's really important. So thinking back to where you started and, even from the past with some of that baggage that kind of came in from that assault, how have you been working on a personal perspective, and how has that translated maybe into how that's helped your business?
It's hard to say for sure just because you don't know what the end looks like, but I can look back on the last year or so and see a lot of progress that I've made. There was a time for quite a long period that I was a bully to myself. In fact, when I was assaulted and had my face shattered, I had such little self-worth that I was convinced that I deserved what happened to me. And so, I don't know. It was an interesting thing. I finally came to the realization that no one else is gonna. Try to think of how to articulate this. If I don't love myself, who's going to?
Yeah.
Kind of a feeling,
Yeah.
The thing is I had a realization one day that there is a mechanism that everybody uses in their daily lives called suspension of disbelief.
Okay.
It's what we use to watch stories and ignore things that are unrealistic.
Got it. Okay.
So if there's like magic in Harry Potter or the Force in Star Wars or elves and orcs in the Lord of the Rings, these things aren't real.
Right.
But we kind of accept them as being real and as part of the story in order to make the plot move forward. The change happened when I realized that was something that I used constantly, that I could repurpose to reprogram my brain into positive thinking.
Love it.
And so I could take my disbelief about my self-worth and suspend it for a time and practice actions in a way that a positive thinking version of Nathanael that values his own self would act. And it took a couple months of practicing that, but finally my brain started to believe what I was telling it.
Yeah.
And I started to understand that it's okay for me to look at myself as someone that has worth,
Yeah.
and started treating myself as someone that I needed to take care of.
Yeah. Well, that's good.
And I think that that has huge implications for success in business,
Mhm.
because how are you going to succeed in any endeavor that you go to attempt if you don't believe you're worth the effort?
Right. Right. No, that's huge. I love the way that you found to kind of position it to change and to see yourself in a different light. And the more you kind of work on that, the more you tell yourself that, the more that belief just blossoms within you. And so I
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah. Um,
Thank you.
some of the things that I've done is, just I have a couple of affirmations that I say. One is I'm whole, perfect, and complete just as I am in this moment. And then two, God is showing me daily just how worthy I truly am. And even with that, like just in the last couple of weeks, because that last one is a little newer for me, it is incredible what my brain starts seeking out to prove to me that I am worthy, and it's really powerful, and you did the same thing, right? You kind of did the same thing to help your subconscious start reaffirming that belief. I
Yeah.
think that's really cool. So
Well, I think the lesson that came from it was I realized that our brains believe what we tell them.
exactly. Exactly.
And so if we're always telling it negative things, it believes
Yep.
it. If we're always telling it positive things, it believes
Yep.
it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, talk to me about some of the coaching that you've done. So, you've done some personal work for sure. Have you done any other coaching? Have you found any other areas to help, whether it's personal or with business for coaching?
Yeah, definitely. I've probably sank in, it doesn't sound like that's the right way to say that. I've probably put 40 to 50 grand worth of funds into personal development and business coaching in the last year and a half,
Mhm.
just because I realized that I want to be successful. I want to be in this for the long term. And I realized that investing in myself, even if it didn't return a monetary return, it would help me become the person that I want to be,
Mhm.
that I could be the example for my son and for possibly other children we might have.
Mhm.
A couple different ones. Let's see if I'll start with Dan Martell.
Mhm.
I joined his coaching program, and he's more business oriented. He's sold several different software as a service companies, and I think last I heard, he's somewhere in the ballpark of $100 million that he's bringing in.
Mhm.
So I get to sit in the room with him and his students every week, and that's kind of a interesting place to be, because I kind of feel like I snuck into a room I'm not supposed to be in,
No, you're
because
supposed to
there's
be
people
right
in there that
there.
are bringing in like $23 million a month,
Yeah.
and it's just wild to be able to kind of be a fly on the wall in there. But the cool thing about his program is he's got what he calls the 5 daily non-negotiables.
Okay.
Basically, these are things that you have to be doing in order to be able to even ask him a question. And those are 10 pages minimum read out of a nonfiction book every day,
Okay.
45 minutes of uninterrupted exercise where you break a sweat, 3 Instagram stories posted every day. And then you also have 5 opens, which is where you reach out to people that are interacting with your social media and talk to them,
Um,
and then ask them if they're there for the content or whether they're looking to receive help for solving a problem.
fine.
And the last one is to review your long-term vision and goals 3 to 5 times a day.
Okay. Awesome.
And so as I've been doing that, I've actually been 78 days strong on my
Awesome.
exercise
Great
goals.
job.
I'm not as strong as some of the other ones, but I'm working on it. And I feel like I've made some really good progress in every single uh, category that's been
Awesome.
presented.
And I think you talked about this. This is the long-term goal. And so it's like training
Yeah.
for a marathon. Sometimes it's a matter of getting the one thing up and running till that one's automatic, and then you can start adding the next one and the next one. So
Yeah. And that's kind of how I'm approaching it.
Yeah, good. I love it. I love it. All right, cool. Okay, and from that coaching, so that's mainly business and helping there.
Mhm.
Okay. Anything else that you've been working on or doing?
Yeah, and so like I mentioned with Ryan Schroep and his community, he's teaching a lot about how to do lead generation,
Mhm.
as well as gain the confidence you need on the lending products that we offer. It's been really cool to see all of the people in that community kind of step up to the plate
Mhm.
and do things together. I think in our little community, I think we changed the name of it recently to Fundwise,
Oh, nice. I like it.
and see 21 people got their first deal within the last 60 days.
Fantastic.
So it's been really cool to see how things have gone forward with that. And then the last thing that I'm working on is trying to figure out a way to set up property acquisition.
Mhm.
So I joined a coaching course with Jesse Stanton,
Mhm.
and he's teaching us how to become a buyer. And one of the things that I'm working on right now is I'm looking for an operations manager
Okay.
that knows more than I do that I can pay to help me kind of learn and run the business.
Awesome.
And they'll be paid a commission out of the property acquisitions that we do.
Awesome. And do you have a market that you're looking in for those properties? I mean, are you
Yeah.
going to
So my
start owning little pieces of that
yeah
valley that you saw?
yeah that's the plan. Yeah.
I
So the big goal behind a lot of this is I'd like to be able to provide affordable housing for wounded veterans and servicemen,
Okay.
especially firefighters who have been injured in the line of duty.
Oh, I love it.
My wife's sister got really sick when she was 13, and she desperately wanted to be a firefighter,
Yeah.
but we lost her when she was 20 years old.
Oh, man.
And so that community has a special place in our heart, and we'd like to be able to provide support for them. But I'd also like to figure out a way to help fight against human trafficking
Mhm.
and maybe provide housing for people who have been victims of that so that they can recover. The I feel like that's the ultimate goal of making the money. We have everything that we need to cover our needs and our wants, really.
Mhm.
But if we can learn how to make money in a way that we can use it to do good, then I think that's the worthy
I
goal.
love it. I love it. Yeah. Well, I think we were talking before, we've both been reading the book, The One Thing,
Yeah.
and it talks about I really love how far into it have you finished it yet? It
Yeah, I just finished
Okay,
it
I was
the other
like, I
day.
didn't wanna do a spoiler alert if you haven't read it yet. Um, the one thing that I really loved, and because it's so simple, is the way they talked about Scrooge and the Christmas Carol and how before he was
Yeah.
so money focused and like that was his purpose. And afterwards, his purpose became, after that fateful night, he became people focused. And so I think for you having that purpose of helping others, especially the firefighters and then the victims of human trafficking, it makes it really clear to start seeing the path that you need to go down, because then you can see like, okay, he talks about stacking dominoes and starting to knock over those dominoes. So then you can start seeing this domino is part of my path, or this one isn't. And I think that's
Mhm.
really, really cool. And I love that mission. What do you feel like as you're thinking back over this past year? Um, so much has changed. You've learned so many things. You talked about going through some different, maybe we call them shiny objects, or just different paths within this crazy realm of real estate investing. But to really, I think it's helpful because it helps you really hone in on where you want to be and what you're good at, what you like, what you don't like. When you think back over this past year and reflect on your journey, what are you most proud of that you've accomplished this year?
I stopped focusing so much on the lack of what I didn't have. I think that there's this overemphasis on happiness in our culture or in our modern day. But what I've found over the last year is that happiness comes and goes, but purpose is what really keeps you going when things aren't feeling all that great, because you're going to have ups and downs. And if you don't have that foundation of a good purpose or something that adds meaning to your life, well, then the happiness feels kind of shallow.
Mm.
But when you have that purpose, even the hard things have meaning,
Yeah.
and they enrich your life. I think that has been the best thing about learning to become an entrepreneur and looking to solve problems, is that it has enriched my life,
Yeah.
and it has enriched the life of my family. And I don't know what the end result's ultimately going to be, because technically I could die tomorrow for any reason, but I have a direction.
Yeah.
And I feel like the growth that I am accomplishing is something that I can hand down to my son when the time
I
comes.
love that.
In fact, that's part of the reason I started the podcast, is that I had this realization that we're one of the first generations in human history that's going to be able to leave behind permanent video record of the things that we've done. Because most of human history, 3 or 4 generations after you die, no one even remembers your name. But now, as long as the internet's around, all these things that I'm doing and the growth that I'm experiencing is going to be there for my descendants to go back and look at.
Wow.
And that actually also adds into somewhat of a mantle of responsibility, because now you have to be aware that those people are going to come back and look at the things you did, and what kind of example are you presenting for them.
That's incredible. I mean, to think that your grandchildren, your great grandchildren down the line can watch this journey of your growth. I've been working with a business coach also, who's also a psychologist. So he made me do all the kinds of fun things. We were talking about my funeral and like what would my kids say? And I think the biggest thing is kind of along that lines, is like, I want to show them that I chased my dreams so that they will chase theirs. And I think you're doing the exact same thing. You're leaving that record for Archie and all to come, to show them that this is where I was, this is where I went, and you can do it too. And you can do even bigger things than I did. And I think that's really, really super cool. I love it.
I think that it ultimately comes down to the idea that if another human being in the world accomplished something, then there's no reason that you can't learn how to do those same things and follow in their footsteps. And often when people do that is when boundaries are expanded and overcome. And so it's an exciting new world. And while there's a lot of bad things in the world, there's also so many opportunities in our modern day that it's incredible.
Yeah.
It's just,
Yeah, I was going to say, one of the things you kind of touched on when you were talking about being able to rebuild your thoughts and the way you see yourself, a lot of this really is here. And we have to work on this and really strengthen this. And then everything in business is just a matter of time and a matter of imagination. Like we can do anything once we realize how powerful we truly are. And I think that's where you're going. And so I'm so excited to watch you continue to grow, to build your operations, get your operations manager on board and start building this portfolio. I'm excited for you and the future that's coming your way. It's speeding your way toward you. I'm excited about it. Well,
yeah, I'm excited too. I'll be honest. It's been an adventure.
yeah,
That's the only word I can think of.
it's fascinating, right? Like you said, there's ups and downs for sure, but as long as you just keep moving forward, man, you're just going to keep growing and expanding. And I love watching that process in people and seeing. So we'll have to revisit in the next 6 months or a year and see where things are at.
Yeah,
But
definitely.
I love it. You'll definitely be back and we'll talk about all the new things that you've got going on. Okay, so as we said, you're on the Pots of Gold podcast, and you can find that on YouTube. Anywhere else that we can find you, that people can find you if they want to check you out?
Yeah, I'm I'm really active on Instagram right now. Of course, my social media handle is the same across all platforms. It's just going to be at Nathanael_Opoulos.
Perfect. All right.
And so that makes it easier for people to find me. I have this hat on in my profile photo. You'll be able to identify me with that. It's just kind of, I figured that I have got this Irish mug. I might as well own it, make it part of my brand.
Love it. I'm so glad that we connected. And I'm so glad that you were one of the first people that I met, or the first person that I met in this community, because you're bound for amazing things. And I'm so excited to watch you grow. So thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate you.
Yeah, definitely my pleasure. I always enjoy chatting with people. Like I said, I thought I was an introvert, but the social thing really lights the energy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Awesome. All right, guys. Well, until next time, we'll see ya. Have a great week.